The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered depot, and Zara Jenkins didn't have the strength left to steady herself against the wooden seat as her body pitched forward, then back again, her vision swimming with black spots that had nothing to do with the harsh Colorado sun beating down through the dusty window. She pressed one trembling hand against her hollow stomach and tried to remember the last real meal she'd eaten. But the days had blurred together somewhere between Kansas City and this God-forsaken stretch of high desert country, and all she could recall was the gnawing emptiness that had become her constant companion. 4 days. It had been 4 days since she'd had anything more substantial than a few sips of water from a canteen that a kind elderly woman had offered her during one of their brief stops. The money she'd carefully saved had run out somewhere in Kansas when the original stage line had gone bankrupt, and she'd been forced to book passage with another company at twice the price. After paying that fare, she'd had exactly $3.17 left to her name, and she'd spent $2 on food that first day, thinking she'd find some way to earn more money along the route. She'd been wrong. Desperately, painfully wrong. The door swung open, and the driver called out in a gravelly voice that seemed to come from very far away. "Alamosa, Colorado. End of the line for today, folks. We'll be staying overnight at the boarding house before heading on to Santa Fe tomorrow." Zara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She watched through a haze as the other passengers, a prosperous-looking merchant and his wife, gathered their belongings and climbed down from the coach without so much as a glance in her direction. They'd kept their distance during the journey, as if poverty might be contagious, as if the shabby state of her traveling dress and the hollow look in her eyes might somehow infect them with bad fortune. She needed to move. She needed to find William Young, the rancher who'd answered her advertisement and agreed to marry her sight unseen. The letters had been proper and respectful, his handwriting careful and deliberate. He'd seemed kind, or at least decent, and he'd promised to meet her at the depot in Alamosa on the 15th of August in the year of our Lord 1876. Today was the 15th. She'd made it somehow, despite everything. But she couldn't seem to make her body obey her mind's commands. Her fingers clutched weakly at the edge of the seat, and she felt herself beginning to slide sideways, the world tilting at an impossible angle. Miss, are you all right?" The voice was deep and warm, touched with genuine concern, and it cut through the fog in her head just enough for her to force her eyes to focus on the figure standing in the doorway of the coach. He was tall, she could see that much, with broad shoulders that blocked out the sun and created a blessed shadow across her face. He wore a dusty brown hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair and eyes that were studying her with an intensity that might have made her uncomfortable under different circumstances. "I'm fine," she tried to say, but the words came out as barely more than a whisper, and then the black spots were spreading, joining together, and she felt herself falling forward into nothing. Strong arms caught her before she hit the coach floor. She was dimly aware of being lifted, cradled against a solid chest, carried out into the bright afternoon that made her eyes squeeze shut in protest. Voices swirled around her, the driver saying something about the mail-order bride for the Young ranch, and the deep voice above her head responding with words she couldn't quite grasp. Then there was movement, the steady rhythm of boots on wooden planks, the creak of a door, blessed coolness, and the soft give of a mattress beneath her back. She forced her eyes open to find herself staring up at the rough-hewn beams of a ceiling, and the face that came into view above her was angular and weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days' worth of dark stubble, and eyes the color of rich earth after rain. Just rest easy now, the man said, his voice gentle despite its natural depth. I'm going to get you some water and food. Don't try to move. Wait, she managed, her voice cracking. Mr. Young, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm not young, the man said, and something flickered across his face, too quick for her to read. Just rest. We'll sort everything out after you've eaten. He disappeared from view, and she heard his boots crossing the floor, a door opening and closing. She tried to sit up, but her head spun viciously, and she fell back against the pillow, which smelled faintly of lavender and clean cotton. Where was she? Some kind of boarding house room from the looks of it. Simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and a small window that let in slanted bars of golden light. The door opened again, and the cowboy returned carrying a tray that he set carefully on the small table beside the bed. He slid one arm behind her shoulders and helped her sit up with surprising gentleness for such a large man, propping pillows behind her back until she was steady. Small sips first, he said, holding a tin cup of water to her lips. Not too fast or you'll make yourself sick. The water was cool and sweet, and it took every ounce of willpower she possessed not to gulp it down desperately. She forced herself to follow his instructions, taking tiny sips, letting the moisture soothe her parched throat. When he judged she'd had enough, he set the cup aside and reached for a bowl on the tray. Beef broth with some soft bread soaked in it, he explained. Your stomach needs something gentle after going without. I'll get you something more substantial once you've kept this down for a bit. Tears pricked at her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. She'd been raised to be strong, to endure hardship without complaint, but this simple act of kindness from a stranger was threatening to undo her completely. He lifted a spoonful of the broth to her lips, and she opened her mouth automatically, too weak and grateful to protest being fed like a child. The broth was rich and savory, seasoned with herbs that bloomed across her tongue, and the bread had soaked up the liquid until it was soft enough to nearly dissolve in her mouth. She swallowed and felt the warmth spreading through her chest, settling into her empty stomach with a sensation that was just shy of painful after so many days of deprivation. He fed her slowly, patiently, spoonful after spoonful, never rushing, never showing any sign of impatience when her hand trembled too much to hold the spoon herself. His eyes stayed on her face, watchful, and twice he paused to give her more water when she started to cough. By the time the bowl was half empty, she could feel strength beginning to seep back into her limbs, sluggish and tentative but real. Her vision had cleared and the black spots had retreated. She raised one shaking hand and managed to close it around his wrist, stilling the spoon on its path to her mouth. "Thank you," she whispered. "I can't. I don't know how to thank you enough." He set the bowl aside and studied her for a long moment, his expression serious. "How long since you ate last?" "4 days. The admission made shame burn in her cheeks. "I ran out of money and I didn't want to beg or 4 days. He said it flatly, a muscle tightening in his jaw. "You could have died." "I know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be a burden to anyone. I was supposed to meet Mr. Young at the depot, and I thought I could just hold on until then and everything would be all right." Her words were tumbling over each other now, driven by exhaustion and relief and lingering fear. "Is he here? Did someone send for him? He's expecting me today, and I don't want him to think I'm not coming or that I'm not grateful for his offer or—" "Slow down," the cowboy said, and his hand covered hers where it still rested on his wrist, warm and calloused and steady. "Just breathe for a minute. You're safe here. That's all that matters right now." She drew in a shaky breath and let it out slowly, trying to calm the frantic beating of her heart. Now that she could see him clearly, she realized he was younger than she'd first thought, probably not much more than 30, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long days squinting into the sun. There was something solid about him, dependable, like bedrock beneath shifting sand. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Zara," she said. "Zara Jenkins. I came from Pennsylvania to marry Mr. William Young. We've been corresponding for 3 months, and he sent money for my passage and promised to meet me here today." The cowboy's expression shifted, something complicated moving behind his eyes. He withdrew his hand from hers and stood, walking to the window to look out at the street below. His shoulders were tense beneath his faded blue shirt, and when he spoke again, his voice had hardened slightly. "There's something you need to know about William Young." Dread coiled in her stomach, joining the warmth of the broth. "What is it? Is he not coming? Did something happen to him?" "He's not coming," the cowboy confirmed, still facing the window. "Young pulled out of Alamosa 2 weeks ago. Packed up his whole operation and moved to California, chasing some rumor about gold. He didn't leave any forwarding address, and he didn't tell anyone he was expecting a bride." The words hit her like physical blows. "No, no, that can't be right. He sent me a letter just a month ago confirming the date. He seemed so sincere. He promised, 'I'm sorry.'" The cowboy turned back to face her, and she could see that he meant it, that he took no pleasure in delivering this news. "I heard about it from the land office clerk. Young sold his ranch to a developer from Denver and left town in the middle of the night. Near as anyone can figure, he owed money to some people he shouldn't have borrowed from." Zara felt the room starting to spin again, and she pressed both hands flat against the mattress, fighting to stay upright, to stay conscious, to not fall apart completely in front of this stranger who'd already seen her at her weakest. "I don't understand. Why would he bring me all the way out here if he was planning to leave? Could be he didn't plan it. Could be his circumstances changed, and he saw a chance to run. Men like that don't always think about who they hurt along the way." The cowboy's voice was tight with barely suppressed anger, though she sensed it wasn't directed at her. "Point is, he's gone and you're here, and we need to figure out what you're going to do next." What was she going to do? She had no money, no prospects, nowhere to go and no way to get there even if she did. The room she'd rented in Pennsylvania before leaving was long since given to another tenant. Her sister, the only family she had left, had married last year and moved to Oregon with her new husband, and Zara had no way to contact her, no way to ask for help even if pride would allow it. "I'll find work," she heard herself saying, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "There must be something I can do. I can cook and clean and sew, and I'm good with numbers. Someone must need." "Alamosa's a small town," the cowboy interrupted, not unkindly. "There's not much work to be had, especially for a woman on her own with no references and no connections. The boarding house might need help, but Mrs. Fletcher already has 2 girls working for her and barely enough business to keep them fed." Despair threatened to swallow her whole. She'd been so certain this was her answer, her fresh start, her chance to build something better than the grinding poverty she'd left behind. William Young's letters had painted such a vivid picture of life in Colorado, of wide open spaces and honest work and the possibility of real happiness. She'd let herself believe in it, let herself hope, and now that hope was crumbling to dust in her hands. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, and this time she couldn't stop the tears from spilling over, hot trails down her cheeks. "I have nowhere to go, nothing." The cowboy was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled the straight-backed chair away from the wall and sat down facing her, his elbows on his knees and his hat dangling from one hand. "Listen to me, Zara Jenkins. You're not alone in this. I won't let you starve on the street or come to harm. We'll figure something out." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. You don't know me, I'm nobody to you. Why would you help me? His dark eyes met hers steadily. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I was raised to believe that when someone needs help and you have the means to give it, you don't turn away. And because. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I know what it's like to have nothing and nobody, and I remember the people who gave me a hand up when I needed it most. Consider this me paying that forward. Fresh tears blurred her vision, but these felt different, cleaner somehow. I don't even know your name. A faint smile touched his lips, the first she'd seen from him. Figured you'd get around to asking eventually. I'm Wyatt. Wyatt Yates. I run a horse ranch about 5 miles outside of town. It's not fancy, but it's profitable and it's mine, free and clear. Mr. Yates, just Wyatt, he corrected. Mr. Yates was my father and he's been dead these past 12 years. Wyatt, she amended, tasting the name. I'm grateful for your help, truly, but I can't accept charity. I need to find a way to support myself. Not charity, he said firmly. A business arrangement, if you want to look at it that way. My ranch could use help. I've been trying to manage everything myself since my hired man left last month to get married, and I'm drowning in work. The house is a mess. I've been eating beans from a can for dinner more nights than not, and my bookkeeping is so behind I don't even know exactly how much money I have in the bank anymore. Hope flickered in her chest, fragile and tentative. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you room and board and a fair wage in exchange for keeping house and managing my accounts. If you're as good with numbers as you say, you'd be doing me a real favor. Lord knows I can barely make sense of my own ledgers half the time. He leaned back in the chair, watching her reaction. You'd have your own room, privacy, and my word as a gentleman that I'd treat you with respect. Nothing inappropriate, just honest work for honest pay. It was too good to be true. It had to be. Men didn't just offer jobs to strange women out of the goodness of their hearts, not without expecting something in return. She'd heard stories about what happened to girls who trusted too easily, who thought they were being offered respectable employment only to find themselves trapped in situations they couldn't escape. But as she looked at Wyatt Yates, at the earnest set of his shoulders and the steady honesty in his eyes, she found herself wanting to believe him. More than that, she found herself without any other viable options. What choice did she have? She could refuse his offer and try to make her own way, but she had no money, no strength, and no prospects. Or she could take a chance on this stranger who'd fed her before even asking her name. I'd want to see the arrangement in writing, she said slowly. Terms clearly spelled out. My wages, my duties, everything official. Wyatt's smile widened slightly. Smart. I can have papers drawn up at the land office tomorrow morning. We can both sign them in front of the clerk so it's all legal and proper. And I'd want to attend church services in town on Sundays, she added. So people can see that everything is respectable, that I'm not. She trailed off, heat rising in her cheeks. That's fine, Wyatt agreed immediately. I attend services most Sundays anyway when the circuit preacher comes through. We can ride in together. Zara drew in a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then I accept. Thank you, Wyatt. You're saving my life. You already saved yourself by surviving this long, he replied, standing and settling his hat back on his head. I'm just giving you a soft place to land. Now, you rest here for a bit while I go see about getting you a proper meal. Mrs. Chen down at the restaurant makes the best roasted chicken in 3 counties, and I think you could use some real food. Then we'll figure out getting you out to the ranch. He moved toward the door, but she called after him, her voice stronger now. Wyatt, why were you at the depot when I arrived? How did you know I needed help? He paused with his hand on the doorknob, glancing back at her over his shoulder. I didn't. I was just picking up a package of horse medicine I'd ordered. I saw the stage pull in and noticed the driver helping the other passengers down, and then I saw you through the window, saw how pale you were, how you couldn't seem to stand. Just instinct to go help, I suppose." He shrugged. "Lucky timing, maybe." "Lucky for me," she murmured. After he left, Zara lay back against the pillows and stared up at the ceiling, her mind racing despite her body's exhaustion. In the space of an hour, her entire life had been upended and then, against all odds, set right again in a completely unexpected way. William Young's betrayal still stung, but the pain was distant now, muffled by relief and cautious hope. She thought about Wyatt Yates, about the careful way he'd fed her, the genuine concern in his eyes, the practical solutions he'd offered without making her feel like an object of pity. There was something different about him, something that made her want to trust him despite every warning her mother had ever given her about trusting strange men, her mother. God, if she could see her now. Martha Jenkins had died 3 years ago, worn down by a lifetime of hard work and harder luck, and her last words to Zara had been to find herself a good man who would value her, who would give her the kind of life she deserved. "Don't settle for nothing," she'd whispered with her final breaths. "You're worth more than that, my girl. Promise me." Zara had promised and she'd meant it. But then the years had passed, and the good men in her small Pennsylvania town had all married other girls, and the only offers she'd received had come from widowers twice her age or boys too young and poor to support a wife. So she'd taken matters into her own hands, placed an advertisement in the matrimonial news, and corresponded with 6 potential husbands before settling on William Young, who'd seemed kind and stable and genuine. So much for her judgment of character. But maybe her instincts weren't completely broken. Something told her that Wyatt was different, that he meant what he said, that she could trust him. She'd find out soon enough if that instinct was right or wrong. The door opened and Wyatt returned carrying a laden tray that made her mouth water despite having just eaten the broth. The scent of roasted meat and fresh bread and something sweet filled the small room. "Mrs. Chen sent enough for an army," he said with a chuckle, setting the tray across her lap. "She was horrified when I told her you hadn't eaten in 4 days. Pretty sure she gave me half the kitchen." Zara looked down at the feast before her. Golden roasted chicken with crispy skin, buttered potatoes, green beans seasoned with bacon, fresh rolls still warm from the oven, and a slice of apple pie that looked like heaven on a plate. Her eyes filled with tears again and she pressed one hand to her mouth. "Hey now," Wyatt said, his voice gentle. "No more crying, just eat, get your strength back." "I don't deserve this kindness," she whispered. "Everyone deserves kindness," he replied simply. "Especially people who have had a rough time of it. Now eat before it gets cold. I'll be back in about an hour to check on you and see if you're up for the ride out to the ranch. If not, we can stay in town tonight and head out in the morning." He left before she could respond, and Zara picked up the fork with trembling fingers and cut into the chicken. The first bite was perfection, tender and flavorful, and she had to force herself to eat slowly, to not make herself sick by gorging after days of starvation. But it was hard, so hard, when everything tasted like the finest meal she'd ever had. As she ate, she thought about the future spreading out before her, unknown and uncertain but no longer quite so terrifying. She had a job now, a place to go, a purpose. She'd work hard, prove her worth, save her wages and figure out her next steps. Maybe she'd eventually save enough to open a small business of her own, or maybe she'd meet someone in town, someone honest and decent who might want to court her properly. The image of Wyatt's face flickered through her mind and she pushed it away firmly. He was her employer, nothing more. He'd made his offer clear: room and board and wages for honest work. She couldn't afford to let foolish romantic notions cloud her judgment, not when she'd just narrowly escaped disaster. She needed to be practical, sensible, focused on securing her own independence. But still, she couldn't quite forget the warmth of his hand covering hers, or the way his eyes had softened when she'd cried, or how safe she'd felt when he'd carried her in his arms. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You're being ridiculous. He's just a kind man doing a good deed. Don't read anything more into it." She finished her meal slowly, savoring every bite, and by the time the tray was empty, she felt more like a human being than she had in days. Her stomach was pleasantly full, her head had cleared completely, and strength was flowing back into her limbs. She tested her legs carefully, standing beside the bed and finding that, while she was still shaky, she could support her own weight. The door opened after a soft knock and Wyatt poked his head in. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," she said honestly. "That was the best meal I've ever had. Please thank Mrs. Chen for me." "You can thank her yourself next time we're in town," he replied, stepping fully into the room. "Do you think you're up for a ride out to the ranch? It's only about 5 miles, not too far, and the wagon's got good springs so it shouldn't jostle you too much. Or we can wait until morning if you'd rather rest more." Zara considered. The thought of staying in this small room all evening, alone with nothing but her thoughts for company, held little appeal, and she was curious about the ranch, about what her new home would look like. "I can ride now. As long as you don't mind if I'm quiet. I'm not sure I have the energy for much conversation." "That's fine by me. I'm not much of a talker anyway." He picked up her small traveling bag from where the driver must have left it by the door. "This all you've got?" She nodded, embarrassment warming her cheeks. "I sold most everything I owned to help pay for the passage west. Didn't seem much point in hauling a lot of belongings to a new life." "Fair enough. Travel light, travel free, my grandmother used to say." He offered her his arm. "Ready." She slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow and let him guide her down the narrow stairs of the boarding house and out into the late afternoon sunshine. The air was dry and thin at this altitude, crisp despite the warmth, and she breathed it in deeply, tasting dust and sage and something wild that she couldn't quite name. Wyatt's wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, the horses a matched pair of chestnuts with intelligent eyes. He helped her up onto the bench seat and then swung up beside her, taking the reins with easy confidence. "You ever been out west before?" he asked as they rolled out of town. "Never. Spent my whole life in Pennsylvania until 2 weeks ago. This is all completely new to me." She looked around at the landscape, at the distant mountains rising purple against the sky, at the scrubby plants dotting the red earth. "It's beautiful. Harsh, but beautiful." "That's a good way to describe it," Wyatt agreed. "This land doesn't forgive mistakes, but if you respect it and work with it instead of against it, it'll provide. My horses do well here. Plenty of room to run, good water from the mountain streams, and the altitude makes them strong." "How long have you had the ranch?" "6 years now. Bought it with money I saved working as a ranch hand for various outfits throughout Colorado and Wyoming. Spent 10 years doing that kind of work, learning everything I could, waiting for the right property to come available." Pride colored his voice. "The day I signed those papers and got the deed with my name on it was the best day of my life. First thing I'd ever truly owned." "Your parents didn't have land." His expression darkened slightly. "My father was a gambler and a drunk. Lost everything we had, including our family farm in Missouri, before I was 10 years old. My mother died of fever when I was 12 and he drank himself to death a few months later. I've been on my own ever since." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "That must have been terribly hard." "It was. but it taught me what I didn't want to be, showed me the kind of man I needed to become. Everything I have, I earned through honest work and careful saving. Nobody can take it from me or gamble it away or drink it into nothing." He glanced at her. "What about your people?" "My father died in a mining accident when I was 16. My mother followed him 3 years later. I have one sister, Margaret, but she married and moved to Oregon last year. We exchanged letters for a while, but I haven't heard from her in months." Zara folded her hands in her lap. "I was working in a textile mill in Philadelphia, living in a boarding house with 5 other girls, barely making enough to eat. That's when I decided to try the matrimonial advertisements. Seemed like the best chance for something better." "Instead you got William Young." "Instead I got William Young," she echoed. "But then I got you, so perhaps things worked out the way they were supposed to after all." Wyatt smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable. "I like your way of looking at things, Zara Jenkins. I think you and I are going to get along just fine." They fell into comfortable silence as the wagon rolled across the high desert plateau. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and long shadows stretched across the scrubland. Zara watched a hawk circling lazily overhead and felt something in her chest loosening, some tight knot of fear and anxiety that had been her constant companion for so long beginning to unravel. She was going to be all right. Somehow, against all odds, she was going to survive this. The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise, spread out in a valley between rolling hills. The house was larger than she'd expected, a sturdy 2-story structure built of logs and stone with a wide covered porch wrapping around the front. Outbuildings dotted the property. A large barn, several corrals, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Horses grazed in the nearest pasture, at least 20 of them, their coats gleaming in the slanted light. "It's wonderful," Zara breathed. "It's home," Wyatt said simply, but she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Not fancy, but solid. Built to last." He pulled the wagon up to the house and hopped down, then came around to help her descend. Her legs were steadier now, though she was grateful for his supporting arm as they climbed the 3 steps to the porch. The front door opened into a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, with comfortable-looking furniture arranged before it. The kitchen area featured a cast-iron stove, a long wooden table, and cabinets that looked handmade but well-crafted. What struck Zara most forcefully was the mess. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink and on the counter. Papers covered every available surface. Boots and tools seemed to have been dropped wherever they were last used. Dust lay thick on the mantelpiece and windowsills. Wyatt had the grace to look embarrassed. "I told you I wasn't much of a housekeeper. Been focused on the horses and the business side of things. The house has sort of gotten away from me." "I can see that," Zara said, but she was smiling. This was work she understood, work she was good at. Already her mind was organizing the tasks. Dishes first, then a good sweep and scrub, sort through those papers, air out the rooms. But it's nothing that can't be fixed with some elbow grease and time. "Your room is upstairs," Wyatt said, leading her to a narrow staircase. "There are 3 bedrooms up here. Mine is at the far end. I figured you'd want the middle one since it's got the best light and a nice view of the mountains." He opened the door to reveal a simple but clean room with a comfortable-looking bed, covered in a worn quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a chipped porcelain basin, and a rocking chair by the window. The floor was bare wood but well swept, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser, their petals slightly wilted but still cheerful. "I cleaned it up a bit this morning after I heard about Young leaving town," Wyatt explained. Figured someone might need it. The flowers were my grandmother's touch. She always said a room wasn't properly welcoming without flowers. Your grandmother lives here, she did. She's been gone 5 years now. Raised me after my parents died, did her best to civilize me. This was her house before it was mine. He set her bag on the bed. I'll let you rest and settle in. There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. Come down whenever you're ready and I'll show you around the rest of the place. After he left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed and ran her hand over the quilt, tracing the pattern of interlocking rings. She could feel the history in this room, the care that had gone into making it comfortable. Wyatt's grandmother must have been a remarkable woman, to have raised him into the kind of man who would help a stranger without expectation of reward. She stood and went to the window, pushing aside the faded curtains to look out at the view. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the August heat. Closer to the house, she could see the horses moving peacefully through their pasture, their tails swishing at flies. It was so different from the crowded, dirty streets of Philadelphia, from the endless noise and smoke of the mill, from the cramped boarding house room she'd shared with 2 other girls. This felt like possibility, like hope, like maybe, just maybe, she could build something good here. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small closet and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. Then she washed her face and hands in the basin, finger-combed her dark hair and repinned it as best she could without a proper mirror. Her reflection in the small glass above the washstand showed a young woman with dark circles under her blue-gray eyes, cheeks still too hollow from her ordeal, but there was color returning to her face and a determined set to her jaw. 23 years old and starting over from nothing. Again. But this time felt different. This time she had a real chance. She made her way back downstairs to find Wyatt standing at the kitchen counter, staring at the pile of dishes with a look of resignation. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps and offered a sheepish grin. I was just contemplating whether it would be easier to just burn the whole mess and buy new plates. Zara laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuineness. That won't be necessary. You have soap, and I'll need water heated on the stove. I can manage that much at least. He moved to fill a large pot from the hand pump at the sink. You sure you're up for this tonight? You've had a rough day. I'm up for it. Honestly, I think keeping busy will help. Give me something productive to focus on instead of dwelling on everything that went wrong today. She rolled up her sleeves and surveyed the kitchen with a practical eye. Besides, I start my job tomorrow, and I'd like to begin with a clean slate. Literally. They worked together in companionable silence, Wyatt heating water and bringing in fresh kindling for the stove while Zara organized the dishes and found the soap. As she scrubbed plates and cups, she felt herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of the work, the hot water and steady motion soothing something deep in her bones. Can I ask you something? Wyatt said after a while, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. Of course. What made you decide to become a mail-order bride? Pretty girl like you must have had options back east. Heat rose in her cheeks at the compliment, but she kept her focus on the plate she was washing. Not as many options as you might think. The men in my town were either already married, too young, or interested in girls with better prospects. I had no dowry, no property, no family connections worth mentioning. I was just another mill girl working herself to death for pennies. She rinsed the plate and set it in the drying rack. The matrimonial advertisements offered something different, a chance to be a partner instead of just another pair of hands, a chance at land and a future and maybe even happiness. That why you chose young specifically? His letters were kind. He wrote about the ranch, about wanting a wife who would share the work and the success, about building something together. He seemed genuine. She shook her head ruefully. Shows what I know about judging character through letters. You couldn't have known he'd run out on you. That's on him, not you. Wyatt moved to dry the dishes she'd washed, working in easy tandem with her. For what it's worth, I think his loss is my gain. I really do need help here, and I have a feeling you're going to be damn good at running this place. I'll do my best, she promised. They finished the dishes, and Zara moved on to sweeping the floor while Wyatt built up the fire in the fireplace against the evening chill that was already creeping in. The temperature dropped fast here at altitude once the sun went down, and she was grateful for the warmth. I should get started on evening chores, Wyatt said, settling his hat on his head. Need to check on the horses, make sure everyone has feed and water. You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be a full day. Can I come with you? The request surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. I'd like to see the horses and learn what needs doing around here. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but just watching tonight, you're not up for heavy work yet. The evening air was crisp and cool as they walked to the barn together, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the barn it was warm and dim, lit by the lantern Wyatt carried, smelling of hay and horses and leather. The animals nickered softly as he moved among them, checking water buckets and distributing feed with practiced efficiency. These are the mares, he explained, gesturing to one row of stalls. I breed them to quality stallions and sell the foals. That's the main business of the ranch. Over here are the geldings I use for ranch work, and rent out sometimes to folks in town who need transportation. Zara watched him work, noting the gentle way he spoke to each horse, the careful attention he paid to their condition. A pretty bay mare stretched her neck over the stall door, and Wyatt paused to scratch between her ears. This is Juniper, he said. She's my best brood mare, throws strong, sound foals every time. She's due to drop her current foal in about a month. Can I pet her? Zara asked. Course. Just move slow and let her smell your hand first. Zara approached the mare carefully and offered her hand. Juniper's nose was velvet soft as she snuffled at Zara's palm, then allowed her to stroke the white blaze on her forehead. The contact was soothing, grounding, and Zara felt some of the last tension drain from her shoulders. She likes you, Wyatt observed. Juniper's usually particular about people. I like her too. She's beautiful. They finished the evening feeding and walked back to the house together under a sky now thick with stars. The Milky Way stretched overhead in a luminous band, so bright and clear that Zara stopped in her tracks to stare. You can't see stars like this in the city, she breathed. There are so many. Wyatt tilted his head back to look up. First time I came out west, the stars were what got me. Made me feel small, but also like I was part of something bigger, like there was room here for dreams to grow. I know exactly what you mean. Inside, Wyatt showed her where everything was stored in the kitchen so she could prepare breakfast in the morning. He explained his usual schedule. Up before dawn, morning chores with the horses, breakfast, then whatever work the day demanded, whether that was training, repairs, bookkeeping, or trips into town. Evening chores at sunset, then supper and bed. I'm not a picky eater, he assured her. Whatever you want to cook is fine by me. Just having regular meals again will be a luxury. I'll go through the pantry tomorrow and make a list of what supplies we need, Zara said. And I'll start sorting through those papers, get your accounts organized. Sounds perfect. He stifled a yawn. I should let you get some sleep. It's been a long day for both of us. Wyatt. She touched his arm lightly as he turned to go. Thank you. Again. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express how grateful I am. His eyes softened. You don't need to keep thanking me, Zara. Just do good work and be happy here. That's thanks enough. She lay in bed that night listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant whinny of a horse, the creak of the old house settling, the whisper of wind through the valley. So different from the constant noise of the city, but she found she liked the quiet, the sense of space around her. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of Wyatt's face when he'd looked up at the stars, the wonder and contentment in his expression. She thought about the careful way he'd fed her, the genuine concern in his voice, the easy partnership they'd already begun to form. This was going to work. She could feel it in her bones. This strange twist of fate that had brought her to this ranch, to this man, was going to lead somewhere good. She just had to be patient enough to see where. Morning came early on the ranch. Zara woke to pre-dawn gray light filtering through her window and the sound of boots on the stairs as Wyatt headed out to start his morning chores. She dressed quickly in her oldest dress, pinned up her hair securely, and made her way down to the kitchen. The stove was still warm from being banked overnight, and she built up the fire efficiently, then set coffee to brewing and took stock of what she had to work with for breakfast. Flour, eggs from what must be a chicken coop somewhere on the property, bacon in the cold box, and a jar of preserved peaches. She could work with that. By the time Wyatt came in from the barn, stamping dust from his boots on the porch, the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, frying bacon, and biscuits baking in the oven. He paused in the doorway and just stared for a moment. "Is that real, or am I still dreaming?" he asked. Zara laughed and gestured to the table, which she'd already set with plates and silverware. "It's real. Sit down. Everything's almost ready." She served him a plate piled high with fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, golden biscuits, and a generous helping of the preserved peaches. His expression as he took the first bite was almost comical in its pleasure. "This is incredible," he said around a mouthful of biscuit. "I'd forgotten what real food tastes like. You've been living on beans from a can. Anything would taste good compared to that." But she was pleased by his reaction nonetheless. Cooking for someone who appreciated good food was infinitely more satisfying than cooking for herself alone. After breakfast, Wyatt headed back out to work with the horses while Zara tackled the house in earnest. She worked methodically, room by room, scrubbing and organizing and airing out spaces that had clearly been neglected for months. In the main room, she found the source of the paper chaos. A battered desk in the corner absolutely buried in receipts, invoices, correspondence, and ledgers. She spent the afternoon sorting through everything, creating organized stacks, and trying to make sense of Wyatt's accounting system, which appeared to consist primarily of stuffing papers into drawers and hoping for the best. By evening, she had a clearer picture of his finances, and she was impressed despite herself. The ranch was doing well, turning a solid profit, with money in the bank and no debt to speak of. Wyatt just needed better organization to really maximize his earnings. Over the following days and weeks, they fell into an easy routine. Zara would rise early, prepare breakfast, and spend her mornings cleaning and cooking and gradually transforming the house into a real home. Afternoons were devoted to bookkeeping and correspondence, and she discovered she enjoyed the puzzle of managing accounts, finding ways to cut costs here and increase revenue there. Wyatt worked from dawn to dusk with the horses, training the younger ones, tending the pregnant mares, maintaining fences and equipment. In the evenings, they'd eat dinner together and talk about their days, about plans for the ranch, about nothing in particular. It was comfortable, companionable, and Zara found herself looking forward to those evening conversations more than she probably should. True to his word, Wyatt had taken her into town after her first week at the ranch, and they'd signed proper employment papers at the land office. everything legal and documented. The clerk, a balding man named Henderson, had looked at them with undisguised curiosity but kept his questions to himself. Word would spread, Zara knew, about the mail-order bride who'd ended up as Wyatt Yates' housekeeper instead. They attended church services together the following Sunday, and Zara endured the curious stares and whispered conversations with her head held high. Wyatt stayed close to her side, his presence solid and reassuring, and he introduced her to several people as his bookkeeper and housekeeper, emphasizing the professional nature of their arrangement. Mrs. Chen from the restaurant came over after the service and took Zara's hands in both of hers. "You look much better now," she said warmly. "Wyatt is a good man. You are safe with him." "I know," Zara replied, and she meant it. In the weeks since arriving at the ranch, Wyatt had been nothing but respectful and kind. He kept his distance, never overstepped, treated her as a valued employee and increasingly as a friend. But sometimes she'd catch him looking at her when he thought she wasn't watching, his expression thoughtful and complicated. And sometimes she'd find herself watching him as he worked with the horses, admiring the easy strength of his body, the patience in his hands, the gentle authority in his voice. She tried not to think about what those observations might mean. One evening in early September, Zara was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Wyatt came in earlier than usual, his face tight with worry. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, setting down her knife. "Juniper's in labor and something's not right. She's been at it for hours, but the foal's not coming. I think it might be breached." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing on end. "I need to go into town and get the veterinarian, but I don't want to leave her alone that long." "Tell me what to do," Zara said, already untying her apron. "I'll stay with her while you go. You don't know anything about foaling. Then teach me the basics. You said yourself you'll be back in a few hours. I can keep watch, let you know if anything changes." He hesitated, then nodded sharply. "All right, come with me." In the barn, Juniper was lying on her side in a large foaling stall, her coat dark with sweat, her breathing labored. Zara's heart clenched at the obvious distress. "Just stay with her," Wyatt instructed. "Talk to her, keep her calm. If you see any part of the foal emerging, come find me immediately. Don't try to help pull it yourself. And if she gets up and starts acting frantic, that could mean the foal is stuck and causing her pain. Here." He handed her a rifle from the rack by the barn door. "Keep this with you. Sometimes predators are drawn by the smell of birth. If you see or hear anything outside the barn, fire a shot in the air to scare it off." "I'll be fine," Zara assured him, taking the rifle with more confidence than she felt. "Just hurry." After he left, she settled into the straw beside Juniper and laid a gentle hand on the mare's neck. "It's all right, girl. Wyatt's gone to get help. You're going to be just fine. Your baby's going to be just fine." She kept up a steady stream of quiet talk, stroking Juniper's neck and shoulder, offering what comfort she could. The mare's dark eyes rolled toward her, and Zara could have sworn she saw gratitude there. The hours dragged by with agonizing slowness. Zara lit a lantern as darkness fell, keeping vigil in the circle of warm light. She sang softly, half-remembered hymns from her childhood, and told Juniper about Pennsylvania, about the textile mill, about her journey west. Anything to fill the silence, to keep the mare calm and herself from dwelling on all the things that could go wrong. She was in the middle of a story about the time she'd accidentally dyed her sister's favorite dress purple when she heard it. A low growl from somewhere outside the barn. Every muscle in her body went tense, and she slowly reached for the rifle, bringing it to her shoulder the way her father had taught her years ago. The growl came again, closer now. Something was circling the barn, drawn by the scent of the laboring horse. Zara stood and moved to the barn door, her heart hammering. She could see nothing in the darkness beyond the small circle of light from the lantern, but she could hear it, whatever it was, moving through the brush near the corral. She raised the rifle and fired a shot into the air. The report was deafening in the quiet night, and the recoil nearly knocked her backward. But the effect was immediate. The sound of whatever had been prowling retreated rapidly into the distance. Juniper had struggled to her feet at the sound of the gunshot, ears pinned back in alarm. Zara set the rifle aside and hurried to the mare's side, murmuring reassurances until she settled again. It was another hour before she heard the rapid approach of horses and the rattle of a wagon. Wyatt burst into the barn with a gray-haired man carrying a medical bag, both of them breathless. "I heard a shot," Wyatt said, his eyes scanning the barn frantically before landing on Zara. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Something was prowling around outside, probably a mountain lion based on the sound. "I fired into the air like you said and it ran off. Juniper's been stable but uncomfortable." No sign of the foal yet. The veterinarian, Dr. Marsh, was already examining Juniper with practiced efficiency. "Good call getting me. Foal's breached all right, both front legs folded back. I'll need to reposition it. This might take a while." Wyatt pulled Zara aside while the doctor worked. "You did good, real good. I'm sorry I left you alone with a mountain lion prowling around. You had no choice, and I wasn't about to let anything happen to Juniper." She managed a shaky smile, "though I'll admit my heart's still pounding." He reached out and squeezed her shoulder, his hand warm and solid through the fabric of her dress. "You're braver than you give yourself credit for." They watched tensely as Dr. Marsh worked, his hands inside the mare as he gently manipulated the foal into proper position. Juniper groaned and shifted but tolerated his ministrations with remarkable patience. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the doctor stepped back. "That should do it. Nature should take its course now. Keep her calm and let her labor progress naturally." Within an hour, a wet, gangly foal was lying in the straw, and Juniper was licking her baby clean with obvious devotion. The foal was a dark bay like its mother, with white socks on all 4 legs and a crooked blaze down its face. "Beautiful," Zara breathed, watching as the foal struggled to its feet on spindly legs and immediately began nursing. "A colt," Dr. Marsh announced, packing up his bag. "Strong and healthy thanks to quick intervention. Another few hours and we'd have lost them both." After the doctor left, Wyatt and Zara stood side by side at the stall door, watching the mother and baby bond. The crisis had passed and exhaustion was catching up with both of them, but neither seemed ready to leave. "Thank you," Wyatt said quietly, "for staying with her. For being brave when you needed to be, for handling everything so well. She's special. I could tell that from the first time I met her. I wasn't going to let anything happen to her if I could help it." Zara leaned against the stall door, suddenly aware of how close Wyatt was standing, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "What are you going to name the colt?" "I was thinking you should name him. You helped bring him into the world after all." She considered, watching the foal nurse contentedly. "What about August, since that's when I arrived here, when everything changed?" Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. When she glanced up at him, he was looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "August," he repeated. "I like it. Good strong name for a good strong colt born on an important day." There was something in his voice, in the way he was looking at her, that made her pulse quicken. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility and all the things they hadn't said in the weeks they'd been living under the same roof. "Zara," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "This arrangement we have, this professional relationship." It's not working anymore. Her heart plummeted. He was going to let her go, send her away, and where would she go? What would she do? I'm sorry if I've done something wrong. I can work harder, do better, I know. He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face, gentle but firm. You don't understand. It's not working because I can't keep pretending that I just think of you as my housekeeper. I can't keep pretending that I don't spend all day looking forward to dinner just so I can sit across from you and talk. I can't keep pretending that my heart doesn't do something complicated every time you smile at me. Zara stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Zara Jenkins. Somewhere between feeding you that first bowl of broth and watching you face down a mountain lion to protect my horse, I went and fell completely, stupidly in love with you. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, his touch achingly tender. I know I shouldn't tell you this. I know it puts you in an impossible position since you work for me and depend on me for food and shelter. But I can't keep it to myself anymore. I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just asking you to know the truth. Her hands came up to cover his where they still cupped her face. You big fool, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. How could I not feel the same way? How could I spend every evening looking forward to seeing you, learning about you, talking with you, and not fall in love? Hope flared in his eyes, bright and fierce. You mean that? I mean it. I've been trying so hard not to feel this way, telling myself it was inappropriate, that I was just grateful for your help, that I was confusing gratitude with something deeper. But it's not gratitude, Wyatt. It's love. Real, terrifying, wonderful love. He made a sound low in his throat, and then his mouth was on hers, kissing her with a hunger that stole her breath and made her knees weak. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like coffee and dust and something essentially him, and she wanted to drown in it in him in this moment that felt both inevitable and miraculous. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. What? Marry me. Not because of some arrangement through letters with a stranger. Not because you need security or I need a housekeeper. Marry me because I love you and you love me, and I want to spend every day for the rest of my life waking up knowing you're here. We've only known each other 6 weeks, she said, but she was smiling through her tears. I knew after 2 days, he countered. I just needed to wait until I was sure you felt safe enough to choose freely without pressure. But now I'm asking, will you marry me, Zara? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love? Yes, she breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverently, like she was something precious and fragile that he needed to protect. When he pulled back, his smile was brighter than the sun. I'm going to do this right, he promised. Proper courtship, proper proposal with a ring, proper wedding with all the trimmings. I want everyone to know that you're choosing me and I'm choosing you, no desperation involved, just love. I don't need all that, Zara said, but she was touched by his determination to give her a proper romantic beginning. Maybe you don't need it, but you deserve it. You deserve everything good, Zara, and I aim to give it to you. They stood there in the barn, holding each other while Juniper and baby August dozed in their stall, and Zara felt something shift and settle deep in her chest, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. This was right. This was where she was meant to be, who she was meant to be with. The journey that had brought her here had been terrifying and painful, but it had led her to this man, to this moment, to this love that felt strong enough to build a lifetime on. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Wyatt took Zara into town and bought her a simple gold band with a small sapphire that he slipped onto her finger in front of the jeweler and half the customers in the store. Word spread fast through Alamosa that the mail-order bride who'd come for William Young was marrying Wyatt Yates instead. And the gossip ranged from scandalized to romantic, depending on who was doing the talking. They set the wedding date for the first Saturday in October, giving them time to make proper preparations. The circuit preacher would be in town that weekend, and they'd have the ceremony at the little church with anyone from town who wanted to attend. Zara sewed herself a new dress for the occasion. Simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Nothing fancy but pretty and fresh and entirely hers. Mrs. Chen insisted on providing the wedding meal afterward, refusing to accept any payment despite Wyatt's attempts. "You are good people," she said firmly. "This is my gift to you, good food for good hearts." In the evenings, Wyatt courted Zara properly, taking her for walks through the ranch property, showing her his favorite spots, teaching her to ride so she could accompany him on his rounds. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories, dreams, fears, and hopes. He told her about the years of hard work and saving, about his grandmother who'd shown him that family wasn't always about blood but about love and commitment. She told him about her mother's dying wish for her to find happiness, about the leap of faith it had taken to travel west alone, about the fear and desperation that had driven her onto that stagecoach with barely enough money to survive. "I'm glad you were brave enough to take that chance," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "Even though Young was an idiot who didn't deserve you, I'm glad you came, because it brought you to me." "I'm glad too," she replied, leaning into his side. "Even the hard parts, even being so hungry I thought I might die. Because you're right, it brought me here to you, to this life, and I wouldn't change that for anything." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the October air crisp with the promise of coming winter. Zara dressed carefully in her new gown, pinning her dark hair up in a style that took an hour to perfect. When she looked at herself in the small mirror, she saw a woman transformed from the hollow-eyed, desperate creature who'd stumbled off that stagecoach 2 months ago. Mrs. Chen arrived early to help her dress and fuss over her appearance. "Beautiful," she declared. "Wyatt is very lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Zara said. The church was packed when they arrived, seemingly half of Alamosa having turned out for the ceremony. Zara walked down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Marsh, who'd volunteered to give her away since she had no family present, and her eyes found Wyatt waiting for her at the altar. He looked devastating in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed for once, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her flush. When she reached him and Dr. Marsh placed her hand in his, she felt the slight tremble in his fingers and knew he was as overwhelmed by this moment as she was. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They spoke their vows clearly, firmly, meaning every word. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and told Wyatt he could kiss his bride, he cupped her face in his hands the same way he had that night in the barn, and kissed her with such tender reverence that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The celebration afterward at Mrs. Chen's restaurant was joyful and boisterous. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Wyatt held Zara close as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, and she rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "Happy," he murmured. "Ridiculously, impossibly happy," she confirmed. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, the wagon bed full of gifts and well wishes from their neighbors. Wyatt had tied tin cans to the back that rattled cheerfully as they rolled along, announcing their newly married status to anyone within earshot. At the ranch, he swept her up in his arms and carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests, setting her down gently in the main room that was now lit by dozens of candles he must have arranged before the ceremony. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," he said, and the way he said her new name made her heart skip. "It's a good name," she said, reaching up to pull him down for a kiss. "A perfect name." That night, they made love for the first time as husband and wife, and it was everything Zara had hoped for. Tender and passionate, gentle and consuming, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them. Afterward, she lay in his arms in the bed they would now share and felt more at peace than she ever had in her life. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying. Where else would I go? You're my home now." The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their joint management, Zara's organizational skills and head for numbers complementing Wyatt's expertise with horses and livestock. They expanded gradually, adding more breeding stock, improving the bloodlines, developing a reputation for quality animals that drew buyers from as far away as Wyoming and New Mexico. Baby August grew into a magnificent stallion that became the foundation of their breeding program, throwing foals with his mother's temperament and his father's speed. They never sold him, keeping him as a reminder of the night Zara had proved her courage and they'd finally admitted their feelings. In the spring of 1878, Zara gave birth to their first child, a robust boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray-blue eyes. They named him Henry after Wyatt's grandfather, and Wyatt proved to be as gentle and patient a father as he was a husband and horseman. 3 more children followed over the next years. Another son they named Thomas, and then twin daughters, Rose and Claire, who kept the entire household in chaos from the moment they learned to walk. The house that had once been lonely and neglected became filled with laughter and noise and the beautiful mess of a growing family. Zara's sister, Margaret, eventually wrote again after years of silence, and they resumed their correspondence. When Margaret and her family made the long journey from Oregon to visit in 1882, the reunion was tearful and joyful, and Wyatt welcomed his new in-laws with the same open-hearted generosity he showed everyone he cared about. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep and the ranch was settled for the night, Wyatt and Zara would sit on the porch and watch the stars just as they had on her first night at the ranch. Sometimes they talked about their day, their plans, their dreams for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, content in each other's presence. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Zara asked one such evening in the summer of 1885, 9 years after they'd first met. "If William Young hadn't abandoned me, if you hadn't been at the depot that day," sometimes, Wyatt admitted. "But I always come back to the same conclusion. Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. All the hard parts, all the scary parts, they were leading us to each other. Fate, love," he corrected. "Strong enough to wait for the right moment, patient enough to let us find our way to each other when the time was right." She turned in his arms to kiss him, tasting forever in the gentle press of his lips against hers. "I'm glad I was starving that day," she said when they parted. "I'm glad I was desperate and frightened and at the end of my rope, because you fed me before you even asked my name, and that told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man you are." "I'm glad I was at that depot," he replied. "I'm glad I saw you and helped you and gave you a reason to stay, because you've given me more happiness than I ever imagined possible. You've given me a family, a real home, a life worth living." They sat together as the stars wheeled overhead and the Colorado wind whispered through the valley. Two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of desperation. The mail-order bride who'd nearly died on a dusty stagecoach, and the lonely cowboy who'd fed her, before asking her name, had become partners in every sense of the word, bound together by love and respect, and the quiet miracle of choosing each other every single day. In 1890, they celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary with their 4 children gathered around the dinner table, now teenagers and young children who filled the house with energy and joy. Henry was already showing his father's gift with horses, spending every spare moment in the barn. Thomas was quieter, preferring books and numbers, already talking about maybe going east to college. The twins were inseparable and constantly scheming, keeping their parents on their toes. After dinner, after the children had been shooed off to bed with varying degrees of success, Wyatt pulled Zara into a dance in the middle of the kitchen, humming a tune from their wedding as he spun her around. "What's this about?" she asked, laughing. "Do I need a reason to dance with my beautiful wife? I suppose not. Though I'm hardly beautiful anymore, Wyatt. I'm 37 years old with 4 children and more gray hair than I'd like to admit." He stopped dancing and framed her face with his hands, his expression serious. "You're more beautiful now than you were the day I met you. You're stronger, wiser, more confident. You're the mother of my children, the partner who helped me build this ranch into something truly special. You're the woman I fall in love with over and over again every single day. Don't you ever doubt your beauty, Zara Yates, not for a second." Tears gathered in her eyes. Even after all these years, he could still make her cry with his unexpected poetry. "I love you so much. I love you more. Impossible. Want to bet?" He grinned and kissed her soundly, and she kissed him back with all the passion and affection of 14 years of marriage. Later, much later, they lay in bed talking about the future. Henry would likely take over the ranch someday, but that was years away yet. Thomas might go to college and become a lawyer or businessman. The twins wanted to be everything from teachers to performers depending on what day you asked them. There was so much possibility ahead for all of them. "Are you happy, Zara?" Wyatt asked, as he sometimes did, needing the reassurance that she had no regrets. Deliriously, she assured him, as she always did. "My life didn't turn out anything like I planned when I left Pennsylvania all those years ago. It turned out so much better. I thought I was coming west to marry a stranger and make the best of it. Instead, I found a partner, a love, a family, a home. I found everything I didn't even know I needed." "That makes 2 of us," Wyatt said softly. "You saved me just as surely as I saved you that day, you know. I was so lonely before you came, so focused on work and building the ranch that I'd forgotten what it felt like to really live. You reminded me. You gave me reasons beyond just surviving. You gave me joy." They held each other in the darkness, 2 souls that had been lost and found, 2 hearts that beat in perfect synchronization. Outside the window, the Colorado stars shone down on the ranch they'd built together, blessing it with their ancient light. The story could have ended so differently. Zara could have died on that stagecoach from starvation or despair. William Young's betrayal could have destroyed her completely. Wyatt could have been elsewhere that day, unable to help, and she might have been lost forever. But fate or fortune or simple human kindness had intervened. A cowboy had seen a woman in need and acted without hesitation, feeding her before even learning her name. That single act of compassion had set in motion a love story that would last a lifetime, a partnership that would build something enduring, a family that would carry their legacy forward into the future. As the years continued to unfold, as children grew and grandchildren eventually arrived, As the ranch expanded and prospered and became known throughout Colorado, people would sometimes ask Zara about her journey west, about how she'd met Wyatt, about the early days of their marriage. She'd smile and tell them the simple truth. I hadn't eaten in 4 days. He fed me before asking my name. Everything else just followed from that one act of kindness. And Wyatt, standing beside her as he always was, would take her hand and add, "Best decision I ever made." Giving her that bowl of broth saved both our lives. It was a story of survival and second chances, of desperation transformed into hope, of two lonely people finding each other in the vast expanse of the American West. It was a love story written in the language of shared meals and honest work, of patience and respect, of choosing each other every day through good times and hard times alike. It was their story, unique and precious, a testament to the truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead directly to the best if we're brave enough to keep going, to accept help when it's offered, to remain open to possibility even in our darkest hours. The mail-order bride who'd nearly died became the beloved wife, mother, and matriarch of a thriving Colorado ranch. The lonely cowboy who'd fed a stranger became a devoted husband and father, his house filled with the warmth and laughter he'd always secretly craved. And it all began with a simple choice: to help someone in need, no questions asked, no expectations attached, just pure human kindness in a hard land that didn't always reward such gentleness. That kindness had been repaid 1,000 times over in love and partnership and family. And in the end, wasn't that what life in the West was really about? Not just surviving, but finding the people who made survival worthwhile, who turned mere existence into something worth celebrating, who reminded you every single day why you kept fighting, kept hoping, kept believing in the possibility of happiness. Zara and Wyatt Yates had found that in each other, and they held on to it with both hands for the rest of their long and happy lives. Their children would tell their own children about the day Mama had arrived in Alamosa with nothing, and Papa had fed her and loved her and made a home for her. Those grandchildren would grow up hearing about the importance of kindness, of helping those in need, of looking beyond surfaces to see the people underneath. The legacy they built wasn't just a successful ranch or a large family. It was a legacy of compassion acted upon, of love chosen daily, of second chances gratefully accepted and then passed forward to others who needed them. On a cool autumn evening in 1906, 30 years after that fateful day at the Alamosa Depot, Wyatt and Zara sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. They were older now, graying and weathered by time and hard work, but their hands were still intertwined and their love still burned as bright as ever. 30 years, Zara marveled. Where did they go? Right here, Wyatt said, gesturing to the ranch spread before them, to the house full of noise from visiting grandchildren to the life they'd built together. Every moment right here, exactly where they were supposed to be. No regrets, not a single one. You. Only that I didn't meet you sooner, she said, leaning into his side. But I suppose we found each other at exactly the right time, when we were ready, when we needed each other most. That we did. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'd do it all again, you know, every bit of it. The hard times and the good times, all of it, just to end up right here with you. Same, she whispered. They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, the same stars they'd gazed at on their first night together, on their wedding night, on countless nights throughout their marriage. The stars that had witnessed their vows and blessed their love, and shone down on the family they'd created. The story that had begun with hunger and desperation, and a cowboy's simple act of feeding a stranger, had become a lifetime of love, a testimony to the power of compassion and second chances, and choosing to believe in possibility even when all seemed lost. It was, they both agreed, the best story either of them could have imagined. And they lived it together, grateful for every chapter, every plot twist, every unexpected grace until their very last days. The mail-order bride and the cowboy who'd saved her had saved each other in the end and built a love story for the ages in the process. And it all started with a bowl of beef broth offered freely and the simple question, "What's your name?"